look at the Passover, what do you think of? What's like the main thing that pops in your head? Food? Horseradish, food? Okay. So when I was asked to study Yeshua's part in the Passover, the one thing that stood out more than anything that really ties it all together is him being our Passover lamb, him being the lamb. I'm not a great improv speaker, so it's going to sound pretty scripted. But so for the first Passover in Exodus 12, the Israelites were given very careful commandments on how to keep it, how important it was to have the right items, the right foods, and the right heart going into the original feast, or else death would consume their firstborn. And even those who were out of town traveling or unclean, it was so important that they had a second date to have their Passover a month later. That's in Numbers 9, chapter 9, verse 10. They had to have a second set-apart day to do the Passover when they were unclean, traveling, whatever. It was that important that they had to keep it. And the first part where we see the Messiah being talked about, being akin to being a lamb in symbolism, is found in Isaiah 53:7, where it talks about the lamb being led to slaughter, yet he did not make a sound. And then the next time would be when Yeshua is coming in, and Yohanan the Immerser says, "See the Lamb of Elohim who takes away the sins of the world." And that, that's just like two witnesses right there that the Lamb is the Messiah. That is where the Lamb comes into, and that's pretty much what I started out with. And then from there I'm going to move forward, and all these comparisons are going to be between what happened in Exodus with the Passover and Yeshua's life and things that happened during that week. I mainly studied through the book of Matthew to find all of these. One of the hardest study for me was seeing how long he was in Jerusalem for that week. I don't have that list of verses, but I came across that he showed up on the 10th day, which would be like the lamb going into your house on the 10th day to be observed, to be tested for Passover. They're looking for imperfections. I think the Orthodox Jews, don't they count the eyelashes? They're that precise about finding the blemishes that could be on the lamb, making it unworthy. And with that, he came in on the 10th day, and in Matthew 21, verse 23, we see the Pharisees who are testing him. In a way, I see it, they're observing his fruits, they're questioning him. And during that week, I found a ton of like the best messages that Yeshua gave during that week before he was crucified. Let's see. Yeah, so he came in, and that's just like, okay, here's the lamb. He's being observed in the house of the Pharisees, of the people. And what was the first thing that Yeshua did when he got to Jerusalem? What was one of the first things he did when he got there? Does anyone remember? It has to do with... Yep, he went into the synagogue, at the temple specifically. What did he do in the temple when he got there? Yep, he threw the money changers. He flipped tables. He said, "You made my father's house into a den of thieves." What are we supposed to do during Passover in our house? We're supposed to throw the leaven out. We're supposed to get the sin out of our lives, to root it out. And we see there Yeshua, during this week, during the time where they're in their own homes getting the leaven out, he goes into the temple, finds the leaven, throws them out.
Would that house be his house?
Would the house be his house?
That's the temple.
Yep.
That was originally,
Mm-hmm.
that was the place where he put his name. I'm just adding to it.
Yeah.
That's okay with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But after the destruction of the temple, then we
become the temple, exactly. Yeah. But it's.
It never dawned on me until now
that is.
It was his house.
It was his house. He had to get and the fact that the people, the Pharisees, the ones who are in charge to guard to guard and protect the temple, allowed it to happen. They just said, yeah, this is a good place for y'all. There's a lot of foot traffic. The feast day is coming up. There's tons of people here. So Yeshua comes up, flips tables, and it's like, now, who's this young guy flipping tables? Who's this 33-year-old dude coming in here getting our salesman out of here? So yeah, that's what I saw the connection was. He was cleaning out the leaven from the temple, the sin out of their lives. Let's move forward here to the next one I found. During the Passover meal, the Last Supper, when he is in Matthew 26:28, This is my blood, which is shed for the remission of sins. During the Passover, when they sacrificed the lamb and they put the blood on the doorpost, that was to have the spirit of death pass over their house. It's, pretty basic. The spirit of death pass over. What were they doing in their houses at the time? It's kind of something you'd have to overthink or underthink even. They were being obedient. They were in their house being obedient, and they had the covering of the lamb outside their house for death to pass over. And on the inside of their house, they were being obedient. And just like, we're trying to do in Torah, we're trying to be obedient to the right ways, yet we're still under the covering of Yeshua and his work and sacrifice for our lives. They were keeping the feast of the lamb, bitter herbs, and unleavened bread. And just like in Revelation, it says the remnant is those who keep the testimony of Yeshua and guard the commandments. That's found in Revelation quite a few times. Moving forward, Exodus 12:42. It was commonplace during the Passover feast for people to stay up late and do a watch, as they did the original Passover. They had their loins girded, their staff in hand, and sandals on their feet, and they were ready to go. And it was a night of watches, and they would, they were watching for the Passover to hopefully the spirit of death passed over their house. They were watching because just like in our lives, we need to always be watching for sin because it's always at the door and it's always on the prowl. Like in Job, Satan is walking in the earth, going up and down in it, seeking like a lion whom he may destroy. So just like during Passover, they watched overnight. And we see that with Yeshua and his disciples, they went to Gethsemane, the garden, to pray. And specifically, he says, "You cannot watch for me 1 hour." And not only were they watching for him, when he says watch for me, maybe he knew what was going to happen to him. He went to the garden to pray specifically, let this cup pass from me. But it was also commonplace for Passover for people to stay up late and watch for evil. It's creeping around. It's going to come. You got to be on your guard. And it makes me think how we should spend our night for Passover, because I don't know how you guys do it, if you guys stay up late during that night, but Yeshua saw it where, hey, let's go and pray tonight. This is a festival. Let's reflect on what Yah has done for us, and let's go and pray. And of course, he was praying for what was about to come upon him, but I'm sure in the Passovers beforehand, he probably prayed then too. It's probably no different than any other Passover he celebrated. Okay. So back to Isaiah 53:7, where it prophesies Messiah going as a lamb to the slaughter, yet not opening his mouth. I'm going to kind of read my script here I typed up. Going back to the items for the Passover feast, when I thought about the crucifixion of Christ, it brought back the remembrance of the bitter herbs. During a Jewish Seder, a Passover Seder, the bitter herbs typically represented the bitterness of the slavery in Egypt. When I was reading through the scriptures on the bitter herbs and I did a word search on it, I didn't see where they necessarily made that correlation a whole lot. It might be in there, I might be overlooking where it is. But when I thought of the bitter herbs, I thought of the bitterness of the Pharisees and how angry they were at Yeshua. Like they wanted to tear him apart, and how hungry they were to, get rid of him. And then it made me think of Judas and all those who betrayed him. But then I thought about the bitterness of the Roman crucifixion and what our Messiah had to willingly endure to fulfill the scriptures. And like Gary said, they watched The Passion of the Christ this time. We do too. My family, we've always watched that movie around this time of the year just to reflect on the punishment, the curses that were laid upon an innocent man on our behalf. And from there, pretty short and sweet. It's Deuteronomy uses the term bread of affliction for when they came out of Egypt. It says this is the bread of affliction. And Yeshua endured all the affliction that we should be taking for our sins. Then from here, I'm going to kind of go through some verses that are in between, just kind of paraphrasing them. And we have Paul in 1 Corinthians 5, 7, and 8. Purge out the old leaven, and Christ is our Passover lamb, is sacrificed for us, to keep the feast in sincerity and in truth. In 1 Peter 1:19, he says Yeshua is the lamb that was found without blemish or spot. Just like your Passover lamb you brought with you into your home had to have no blemish or spot. And with however how many witnesses there are to the Messiah in the Old Testament, it is he fulfilled them all. It is almost a no-brainer, the connection between him being the Lamb, being crucified on our behalf, and the Passover lamb, that the blood that atones for the passing of sin. That sin is at your door, but because you're sealed and you're being obedient in your home and you're sealed by the blood of the Lamb, death passes over, has no power over you. And after all that said, from the original Passover in the Old Testament with the Lamb and with the traditions they kept for hundreds of years, with the life of Yeshua, and during that week throughout Matthew, I think it's chapter 20 through the end of the book, 26, 27, and the theme of the Lamb, keeping that, I went right ahead to Revelations, because that's where it comes back. The Lamb is coming back, and it says here, Revelation chapter 5, that the Lamb is the only one who is worthy to open the scrolls. Revelation 5:12, worthy is the Lamb, having been slain, to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and respect and esteem and blessing. And it's a no-brainer to know that the Lamb in Yeshua is tied up so well. And people nowadays, they look at the world and they use the term sheep. Oh, those people are being complete sheep, but it's a negative statement on something that we're supposed to be, obedient servants to the shepherd. He is the Lamb and the shepherd. Revelation 6:16, we see that the Lamb has a wrath, has power, has strength. He doesn't just, the Roman Catholics, they have their crucifixes right around the house, and that's not, to me, that's not a good representation of who Messiah is. It says in 1 John 3:8, the purpose of the Son of Elohim was manifested to destroy the works of the devil. That should be on a bumper sticker. Here is Yeshua who destroys the works of the devil, not the Yeshua who is crucified, weak, the imagery they place on that. It's just, he has strength, he has wrath, he has power. It's all in his control and in his hands. Revelation 12:11, and they overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb and because of the word of their witness, and they did not love their lives to the death. I think this is where we will find the key to how we should walk our life, which is not loving our life, not loving the materialism, not loving the things you want to chase. Ooh, shiny thing, go look at this, go get that. No, it's all irrelevant. You don't need to love your life. You're here to serve a purpose, and you're here for the glorifying of Yah and his son Yeshua and the Lamb. And in doing this, Christ did not love his life to the death, and he is the Lamb that has fulfilled the feast of Passover, and in his remembrance and all Elohim has done, we keep this feast, knowing in his hands that his hands is in it at all angles for all time. And it says here in Luke 22 verse 19, where Yeshua is doing the communion, he says to do this in remembrance of me, which is why they did the Passover after Exodus anyways. They did it in remembrance for what God did. And that's the same reason why we do it today. It's as a remembrance. We keep in remembrance that he has fulfilled all of these things, and that it is all tied in like a beautiful picture, like a maze, that when you get to the end of the maze, it restarts again, because it's too perfect. It's like a car crash. It's so beautiful you can't look away. That's the best thing I got. Not beautiful. Car crashes aren't beautiful, but I'm just saying, you see it. You see a car twisted up. You're like, man, that's quite a wreck. But yeah, probably not the best analogy, but like I said, I'm pretty scripted, so that's all I got.